Corruption Watch says South African citizens must use the power afforded to them by our democracy to hold those in power accountable. In an op-ed, the organization's board chairperson, Themba Maseko, highlighted the collaboration within civil society as a factor to put pressure on the state to implement the recommendations of the Zondo Commission. But a lot still needs to be done to protect whistleblowers that bring to light some of the corruption and the malfeasance prevalent in society. So we wanted to really just shine a spotlight on the experience and the reality of whistleblowers in our country. And I'm joined by John Clarke, who is an advocate for whistleblowers. Of course, John is also a social justice advocate as well, amongst a range of other things. John, good morning to you and welcome to the program. So one of the observations this Corruption Watch article was highlighting is the slow pace of justice or accountability for people who might be implicated. And their rising to the surface, or their being named and identified, was as a process of people being brave enough to blow the whistle. Their lives, those whistleblowers' lives, have effectively been put on hold. They might not be employable. They might have lost some of their benefits. Some of them might be still living in fear for their lives and their livelihoods. I'd love us to maybe start there, John, and just give us an architectural view of what the experience and the plight is of whistleblowers in South Africa today.
Well, besides being unprotected and struggling to get jobs, they are still being retaliated against by the abuse of the law, legal processes. I mean, and not only are they getting it, I've got 3 whistleblowers that I've been working with at the moment who are now being the subject of what I call slow suits, strategic litigation on whistleblowers, which is a variation of the SLAP suit, which we know now, and also the SLAM suit, strategic litigation against media. You've known about that. And what is happening is that the adversaries are using the law and abusing the law as a way of silencing them and trying to shut them up. We've seen this happen with Martha Ngoyi, we've seen this happen with others, but they are still doing it. And this is despite the fact that 18 months ago, the Constitutional Court ruled that the abuse of legal process has been outlawed. You cannot abuse the law in this way. They're still not only going after the whistleblowers. I mean, I was a defendant in that big SLAP suit story on the mineral sands judgment. I've now got 2 more defamation suits against me. Why? Because I'm simply providing support and amplifying the stories of whistleblowers. So they're coming after me as well now for that. Fortunately, we've got, pro bono lawyers looking after me and all the rest, and they're going to lose. But in the process of them losing, all they've done is made the whole thing that much more miserable. And I would really want to say up to the media, it's thanks to folk like you, Iman, and other journalists who are actually keeping the flame alive, to use civil litigation effectively to actually roll back this mudslide, because the criminal justice system and the NPA and all the rest are just simply so slow. But we can make some sort of progress if we have a good sense of strategy and purpose of how we can actually beat it, because the law is actually in our favor already.
And that's where I want to go to next, but just also to make a note, John, to yourself and to others like you who find yourselves in that plight. It is a traumatic thing to have to fight a legal, a battle on the legal front, let alone all the other impacts to your life, to your family life, the anxiety and the psychological impact that it has, to have to go to court and to fight and fight and fight. So for people like yourselves and others who have brought something that's in the public interest in the pursuit of accountability, certainly a debt of gratitude goes there. But when you talk about provisions in law, we already have the Protected Disclosures Act, which is being cited as a mechanism to make sure that there are those protections in terms of the legal framework for whistleblowers. Additional resources as well that have been allocated to the NPA to begin to expedite some of the cases or the prosecutions of those who, benefited, enabled, and so on, were involved in state capture. So you have that in the architectural framework, but in reality, what you're sharing with us is a different story. It sounds like there's a dissonance between those provisions and great sort of, legal provisions, but the reality is not changing.
It isn't, and that's hopefully the elections coming up in a little over 6 weeks' time will be an opportunity to sound the whole new trend here. And I think the reason we haven't seen this action is because it hasn't been in the interest of the ruling party or the governing party to have whistleblowers support them. I mean, if you go back in history, I hate to say it, but the ANC, the year that the Constitution was adopted in 1996, retaliated against a whistleblower, Bantu Holomisa. He was expelled from the party for blowing the whistle on corrupt practices that he was aware of. So their track record hasn't been good in the last 30 years in terms of the way in which they've treated truth. But it's not just about the ANC, it's about the nature of power and the truth about power, which is that it doesn't have a defense against the truth, so what it does is retaliate. So it's not in the political interest of political parties generally to have truth tellers. However, we have a constitution and a Bill of Rights, and we therefore have the responsibility as active citizens to actually use those rights to hold the feet to the fire of all the political parties. And I'm very impressed that the one political party that's contesting at the moment, Rise Mzansi, have made a pledge to ensure that whistleblower protection and support is a key plank in their platform. And I would want to challenge all the other political parties to sign up to the same commitment almost as a pledge to say the first priority after the election results are announced, and it was likely to have to be a coalition government, that the plank of that coalition platform should be that all parties are committed to overhauling, as a matter of utmost urgency, the Protected Disclosures Act to ensure that whistleblowers are protected, supported, and incentivized. Because that's, as far as is quite clear from international best practice, is the best way of dealing with corruption, is to support whistleblowers. And of course, those who could have held the leaves of power obviously don't want it, which explains for me exactly why we've had such a slow progress in actually doing what the Zondo Commission have recommended and urged us to do.
I'm not one to quote the Bible, but the Song of Solomon's and, the parable of the foxes in the vine, catch the foxes, the little foxes that spoil the vines. And we've seen, South Africa and its, whether it's public or private sector infrastructure represents those vines. There are foxes all over that are destroying, a yield for South Africa that could be positive, that could benefit our economy, living in a society where people do what they're supposed to do and not, accruing undue benefit for things that they should not be getting benefit from. But they're everywhere. And then people will look at, yourselves and other whistleblowers, people who've even paid, the ultimate price in being murdered for their revelations and say, the problem is too deep, too many foxes in the vine. Look at what's happening with people who do kind of raise their head above the parapet. I'm going to rather just keep quiet. What do you say to those people who must be everywhere across South Africa thinking something's wrong here, want to say something, but I dare not?
Well, the first thing you must do is, if you feel a stirring in conscience to do something about it, don't try and stifle it, but talk to somebody that can support you. Now, you would have ordinarily thought that going to a minister of religion or an imam or somebody would be the obvious thing to do. And I think part of what I want to do is educate them, because obviously they don't want to see their congregants get into trouble, and they will. I mean, the first thing I say to people come to me for counsel and support, I say, it's only going to get worse, because I know the nature of power. If you're going to speak truth to power, you need to know the truth about power. It will not like it. However, we do have, at least on paper, the constitutional safeguards. But what we now need, and that's really where, as a social worker, as psychosocial and spiritual support for people in that predicament, so that they can form horizontal networks of support and solidarity. And that's what makes it so much easier to kind of withstand. I mean, yes, I have got a defamation suit. I'm used to it. I kind of, as a social worker professionally, I thought of this what I was signing up for. Journalists likewise, you know what you're getting into. You know you're going to be under scrutiny. The ordinary whistleblower doesn't know that. They're just doing their jobs. So that's why I've made it a personal commitment to actually support them, because I can just see that we've had some great success on the mineral sands thing to actually roll back a little bit of that kind of encroachment on freedom. So now let's exercise that freedom with greater sense of responsibility and use whatever privilege we have. And everybody has something or other which they have an advantage with. And to use that in solidarity with others to actually, those who don't have the privilege, that those who are struggling against it, and to particularly be careful about scapegoating people wrongly. And this is where it becomes a bit difficult, where there's a lot of discernment needed, because I, in my process, have sought to engage the powers, try and find out, unmask those powers, see what's really going on inside, build relationships across the boundaries with your adversaries and sort of with sympathetic people. And they are there. I mean, how's this? We've just seen the end of e-tolls. A key factor in the ending of e-tolls was when a whistleblower blew the whistle to me and Wayne Duvernay's when I was working with Arta. And that was, and in Mandy Wiener's book, we tell the story about this guy. We called him Captain Kirk, who actually exposed the fact of what was really going on in Sandral. Now we've seen the end of e-tolls. It took a hang of a lot of effort and 10 years to do it, but we have got these success stories, and that's what all voters and politicians and aspirant politicians need to know, that South Africa's got a Bill of Rights and a constitution, and the citizens are going to use it against them if they don't use their authority and power in such a way that we build the fabric and reweave the fabric of our society so that we can be resilient in the face of all the other turmoils that we're having to experience.
John Clarke, thanks again for joining us this morning and talking to us about whistleblowing, what happens afterwards, where to go for resources and some support, and also just what the framework looks like, especially concerning what John was sharing with us there, this strategic litigation, the slow litigation where people with deep pockets can continue to keep people in the courts. However, some people in South African society continue to fight the good fight.